On today's episode of PDubs Arcade Loft, we're going to take a look at the Evercade Alpha. That's right, this fully assembled bar-top-sized arcade machine that comes included with built-in Capcom games, all officially licensed, as well as the ability to expand your game selection using the Evercade Cartridge ecosystem. How does this compare to Arcade1Up Countercades, as well as, is this thing worth buying? We're going to talk about it next. All right, guys, so it's important to note that Evercade and Blaze Entertainment did send me this standard edition of the Evercade Alpha Mega Man version for the purpose of making a review video. I did pre-order the deluxe version of the Street Fighter Evercade Alpha, and I'm looking forward to receiving that later this year and checking out my pre-order. But for now, just diving into this standard edition of the Mega Man, it's got a lot of interesting stuff included with it, including a quick start guide. Make sure you hang on to that if you need to follow written instructions. You get a USB-A to USB-C cable for powering the device. There's no battery included. It does require this power connector, which is included with the device, as well as different plug connections depending on what country you live in, as well as they include optional marquees. If you ordered the standard edition like this one, you'll get 2 bonus marquees you can swap in and out. If you decide to order the deluxe version like I did, you'll get 6 marquees. But when it's out of the box and doing a quick overview of this mini arcade machine, I love the side panel artwork that they went with on the Capcom Mega Man Edition. I think it's a really cool looking design. I like the shape of the mini arcade, like the fact that there's 2 speakers included, mounted on the inside side panels. Love that they included screw cap covers. I think this thing is very colorful, very pretty. You will have to remove the marquee when you first take it out of the box and peel the plastic cover that's covering the plexi that protects the plexi. And although they included optional marquees, those optional marquees don't match the side panels, the control panel, the bezel artwork. I just don't see myself ever using them. They're really nice quality, translucent artwork, but I'm just going to stick with the Mega Man one and never change it. I would recommend you take a screwdriver and loosen the screws that are on the bezel before you actually try to peel the plastic that covers the bezel. If you've owned an Arcade1Up before in the past, you know what I'm talking about, because that way it comes off nice and clean. And take a look at how beautiful that bezel artwork looks. The control panel artwork matches. Everything looks great. At least from an appearance point of view, they nailed it. Nice to see you have a little coin button as your on-off button and your volume switch next to the ports for plugging in additional Evercade cartridges. Now, when it comes to the quality of the controls, the joystick and the buttons that are included, love the fact that the control panel is labeled. That's right, every button is labeled, so you know what button does what. Nice little touch with the artwork. But when we talk about the actual control, there are 2 screws that hold down the control panel. Good news is we have easy access here where you can pop off the screw cap covers using a small tool to get inside here, and that way you can open up the control panel and take a look at what's inside. Now, for the standard editions like this one, these are advertised to have competition grade controls, joystick and buttons. Well, I couldn't find an actual brand on here, such as Baolin or something of that nature. I couldn't find any branding as to what these controls are, but I can tell you, the joystick, pretty loose. It's got like a 2-pound spring in it, and the buttons themselves, though, feel like just typical clone buttons. I think they're decent. With all the gameplay testing I did, they play just fine. They do what they're advertised to do, but I wouldn't scream from the hilltops that they're fantastic controls. I'm expecting to see something better on their deluxe versions, which I believe have actual Sanwa controls coming out later this year. Quick shot of the PCB board in regards to modding and stuff. Don't really see the need to mod this thing, especially since you can just add games with cartridges, but there it is if you want to see it. Not much opportunity there. And although the controls are serviceable, not premium, there's no plastic cover on the control panel, but I wouldn't worry too much about it because you could tell when you feel the control panel that the artwork definitely feels different than the artwork on the side panels. It's definitely more of a rub-resistant artwork. Here's a quick shot of the inside of the mini arcade cabinet, and as you can see here, love the fact that we have 2 decent speakers inside of the arcade machine. Sound quality is pretty good. Plenty of room back here if you did want to mod it, but the question is do you want to mod it? Do you need to mod it? I've gutted and modded so many Arcade1Up Countercades. I've lost count of them, but I gotta tell you, I really don't see any reason to mod it. This is an expandable system. is missing a battery though. Would have been nice if they included a battery. That way you could kind of charge it and carry this thing around without it being plugged in. But is it the end of the world? No, because guess what? All the other counterarcades I bought from Visco, Unico, from Arcade1Up, none of those had a battery in them either. All right, let's dive into the user interface. Every time you boot up the machine, there will be a cute little boot up sequence, splash screens, Evercade Alpha, nice job there. First time you power it on, it's going to ask you what language you speak. After you pick it, it'll then immediately search for an internet connection. Once you connect to the internet, you have to accept their end user license agreement. It'll immediately check for any updates. There should always be a day one update, which you want to download and get updated. What's really nice about this being Wi-Fi connected is the fact that Evercade always pushes out a free game of the month to all the owners who play with the Evercade handhelds or VS console. So you'll still have access to that. I have to say, although this is a small 8-inch screen, it is a very nice IPS screen. All the colors look great and all the viewing angles look great from pretty much any position I sit in when I'm staring at this thing. Under the A category, you'll see the built-in games. There's 6 games included. You also see the cartridge section if you had cartridges. Under the star section, you'll see there's our game of the month. It's Flea. That'll change every month. They'll push out a firmware update. There's also a little marketing thing here where you could go in and see what other cartridges are out there that you can pre-order and buy, and all the different kinds of cartridges and games that they have available. So I'm assuming this will get updated as well. The big winner, of course, with the user interface is this is pretty much the very similar and same user interface that Evercade uses on their handhelds, VS consoles. So when it comes to changing aspect ratios, how you see fit, how you want to add shaders, scan lines, if you want to have bezels behind the games when you're playing like the arcade games, which don't take up the full screen, like vertical games and stuff. If you wanted to have bezels, all that stuff. So all the options are included, which is really, really cool. And of course, you could adjust the volume, you could adjust the sound, the music volume. You could also adjust whether or not you want the attract mode video playing, which is really cool for attract modes, things like that. There's so many great options on here. Big shout out to Evercade for putting those all on this mini arcade machine. Hell, you could even remap the buttons if you want. Now, there are 6 Capcom games built into this mini arcade machine. Let's kind of dive into them and check them out real quick. One thing I do have to point out is just like every other bar top, countercade, mini arcade machine I've owned, you really don't have a place to rest your hand, your wrists when you're playing these kind of games this way in this form factor. So unfortunately, extended gameplay sessions, at least for me, someone who suffers from carpal tunnel, I ended up having to take some breaks in between testing a bunch of these games. But overall, you get Mega Man the Power Battle, Mega Man 2 the Power Fighters, Carrier Airwing, Final Fight, Knights of the Round, and Strider, all arcade versions on this arcade bar top, officially licensed, optimized, ready to go, and they play really, really well in my opinion. It's just a shame that the other games like Street Fighter and all the Street Fighter games, unfortunately, you have to buy the separate Evercade Alpha to get those games. It would have been nice if all 12 games or 13 games were included on both machines and you were just paying for the artwork or, you know, that kind of thing, especially for the price that they're charging for these Evercade Alphas. However, the one nice thing and the big selling point about this is you have the ability to add more games and play more games on this machine using the Evercade Cartridge ecosystem. Where this machine is really going to shine is on using their actual arcade cartridges versus a lot of the console games. All you have to do is just plug the cartridges into the open slots on the front of the machine. Doesn't matter if the machine's powered on or off to access more game. It'll detect the cartridges right away, and all the games available, whether you have one cartridge or two plugged in, are there, ready to be played. I own about 30 Evercade cartridges that I've paid for myself out of my own pocket, and I pulled a few off the shelf. I tested about 6 arcade cartridges and about 4 console cartridges. And I have to say that when it came to, again, the arcade games, this is where this little mini arcade machine is going to shine. It was super fun to play these games on this mini arcade machine. I didn't really notice any issues with the games. I didn't see anything with the emulation that would cause me to raise an eyebrow. Everything ran and played well. And the controls, despite the fact that they're advertised as competition grade, even though they feel pretty much similar to, just a tad bit better than what Arcade1Up includes on their countercades, I didn't have any issues with the controls. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, and everything played really, really well, and I had a lot of fun doing so. Now, the problem, though, is, when you try to play console games. Although this machine is advertised to play roughly 500 games, the entire Evercade collection of console games, arcade games, computer games, etc., some of the games, like the Intellivision games, things like that, I'll be honest, guys, not fun to play on this particular form factor. You would rather sit there with a controller in your hand and play those on your TV. However, there are other games like Atari games, Atari Lynx games, that, stuff that, hey man, it was a console game, but a lot of like these platformer type games are actually super fun to play on this particular arcade machine. It's going to be hit or miss in my opinion. Again, I didn't test all 30 carts I own and several hundred games, but what I can say is I had more fun playing the arcade games and the arcade carts than the console carts. How does the Evercade Alpha compare to Arcade1Up countercades? Arcade1Up has been making countercades for years. Probably their best one is this Marvel Superheroes that I still have and hang on to. And as you can see here, when it comes to the size of the machines, the sizes are exactly the same, except this particular countercade, Arcade1Up, actually tried to make a 2-player version, which, let's be honest, guys, I don't think anyone's really going to play 2 players on these countercades. These are more like 1-person type adventures, etc. But the sizes are exactly the same. They both have 8-inch IPS screens. They both have the same quality IPS screens. They both look beautiful from all angles. And keep in mind, the earlier versions of Arcade1Up countercades weren't as nice. I will say this, the Arcade1Up joystick, at least in the Marvel Superheroes, is better. I think that one actually had a 4-pound spring and is a pretty decent Sanwa clone compared to the clone stick that we have here in the Evercade Alpha. But I will say that the Evercade buttons are definitely better than the Arcade1Up buttons in the countercades. You can hack, gut mod Arcade1Up countercades to add more games. When it comes to Evercade, you could use their cartridges and add more games that way, which obviously costs you more money. When it comes to the marquees and all that stuff, everything is the same. So they're definitely comparable products, but Evercade has more options in the user interface, as well as the ability for you to add more licensed games that are optimized for the hardware versus hacking, modding it, and hoping that the games work with the controls and all that stuff. So for my final thoughts, and do you need this? Well, technically we don't need anything, right? We spoil ourselves all year long, every year, buying handhelds, consoles, arcade machines, etc. And the question isn't if we need it, because technically we don't need anything. The question is do you want to play games on this form factor? There are cheaper ways, just getting the Evercade handhelds or the VS console to access their games and play their games. So the question is do you want to spend the extra money to play the games on this particular form factor? Only you can really answer that for yourself. I can't tell you what to do. What I can say is this is a super fun way to play a lot of their arcade games that are in their collection, and some of the console games as well will play on here and will be a fun and enjoyable experience. In my opinion, I'm still looking forward to getting my Street Fighter Deluxe that I pre-ordered out of my own pocket later this year as well. I think it's pretty cool. I wouldn't really recommend playing 2 players on this thing, even though they have a USB port for you to plug in additional controllers. And honestly, you know, playing one player is just fine for me on these countercades. And will it become like the go-to way to play Evercade games? No, I think the VS console's the go-to way. But this is a super fun way to play at least their arcade collection as well as a bunch of other games. But let me know what you guys think. Thanks Evercade for sending this to me for the purpose of making a review video. If you enjoyed this review, give me a thumbs up on the way out. Give me your thoughts, feedback, reactions below. And as always, my dudes, thank you for subscribing.